Yeah. Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you and all our viewers. And I very warmly welcome you to KLF Bhavasambad. And this session we'll be having Miss Seema Sethi and Agniva Roy. And Agniva will be engaging ma'am in a conversation about her book, Romancing the 80s. And before we begin, I would just like to simply introduce ma'am. Seema ma'am is a student of applied arts and she began her journey with the design teams at Oberoi and Satish Sood Graphics. In 1992, she founded her own studio, Seema Sethi Design. Her extensive experience in communication design spans across various industries, including India's leading think tanks, policymaking institutions, and trade chambers. And for the benefits and for the benefit of the audience, I would just like to introduce Agniva Roy. He is a PhD research scholar at Utkal University and is an avid reader. He loves to read books and uh, he's also as a student of literature he has a lot of interests in various genres and today we are very happy to have both of you. And now without wasting any further time, I would just like to ask Agniva to carry carry forward the interview.
Thank you, Aditya. It's a pleasure to be here with you and all our audience on this rainy afternoon, and really glad to have uh, the author amongst us. And without further ado, I'd like to start talking about the work that we have at hand, Romancing the 80s. Um, First, let me tell you, ma'am, it has been a pleasure going through the book. It has been a pleasure going through the book. I mean, it has been a journey back in time almost. And the painstaking research that you have done really shines through uh, the work. So, the first thing that I'd like to ask you about is why the 80s? Is it because of the simple fact that you were born in the 80s? Is it only because of this happy accident? Or what's the character of the of this decade that we need to understand? Ma'am, you have to unmute yourself. You're still on mute. You're still not audible, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Is
Now
it
I can
okay?
hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So your question, yes, it was a happy accident that I happened to witness 80s firsthand. And so I was like at the peak of your very impressionable age, and I would say youth impressionable time. I experienced 80s firsthand, and not just that. when you look back, of course, 90s also I experienced firsthand, even later also. But then 80s was a very, very interesting period. So, from the point of view that India was very sleepy before that, and 80s was a time when India was waking up, and things changed very drastically. So, when I look back, the life and India generally, and otherwise what it changed from 80s to 90s and from 2000, the change was much more drastic. So the all the changes which you see, the foundation was all laid in 80s. So 80s was a very, very crucial, critical, and very interesting, and very, I would say, extremely powerful time, for India generally. So and so 80s was, when you are at, I was like half teenager, half, getting into the college. So everything you're absorbing, that time, as you would see. So it was interesting time, as I think out of all the decades.
Right. So, in what ways would you say 80s is a break from the past or the other decades that followed the 80s? In what ways was it a break?
So 80s was, all the changes. So it's, economic liberalization started in 80s, and world opened to us in 80s. So before that, India was very cocooned and closed. And after that, all the changes, when the liberalization had started, television came to India, the satellites had in Doordarshan became national in that in 80s. So that opened the world to us, so before that we were all cocooned in our own world, and suddenly the world opened to us. So that really changed. And then of course, then a lot of political things happened in 80, what the World Cup happened. So World Cup win was not just for the cricket. So it was just India coming back into action, and India realized its own worth. So that changed. So 80s was very interesting. It was music. If you see music, if you see films, and if you see cultural, impact it had, it was very, very different than what we see today. And then of course there were very limited choices that time. So everything was very important to us. We were not spoiled for choices that time. So everything was very savored. Every little thing which happened was very, very important. So you enjoyed that period. And as we go along, we'll break it into things about 80s, and we'll see.
Right. So I think it was Kapil Dev's blurb which said that it's not merely a coffee table book, right?
Yes.
Yes. So how would you like your readers to receive your books? And because I can't find it in myself to disagree with Kapil Dev, having read this book, I think it is indeed more than a coffee table book. So how would you like your readers to receive the book then?
So, like normally for a book, you will say that, okay, this book has been authored by you. And so traditionally, I don't consider myself as an author of this book. So, I whatever I saw, what I felt, what I experienced, I recorded this. So it's a collective memory of 80s. And so I want everybody to associate themselves with this book. So it is not about this is not a fiction or a non-fiction or anything. It's a collective memory of all the people who experienced this. So it was, the idea was not even just to document everything. So there were a lot of, so this is 80s through my eyes. So if somebody else picks it up, they'll relate to a lot of things. And but there'll be some things which will say, oh, this was also there. And I have also like started getting responses like, oh, aapne ye nahi dala usme, or this we had experienced it, so please note it down. So maybe when the book goes for a reprint, please add that, please do that. And then in person, when people have gone through the book, so initially when I started sharing it, so after a point like 10, 15 pages, they would not go beyond that, and they'll start with their own stories. And then like first time when it happened, I was little like, why is it somebody not going beyond 10 pages? Why they're telling the stories? Like, look at the book, look at my, like, see what I've done. And it was a kind of a very consistent kind of a response I got. So randomly they picked up the pace, but I realized, because that's what I wanted it, and that's exactly the response, and that's the book it's doing to people. So you pick it up, and then suddenly you get lost in your own thoughts, your own 80s, which you have experienced it. So this is just a trigger point, this is triggering for the nostalgia which we have experienced it. And of course for the youngsters who have not experienced it, so in some ways, yes, it is documented. There's some things they have never seen it, probably rotary phones, inland letters, how the letters were posted, from films, from posters, from a Doordarshan television, how uh, Akashvani, your radio programs. So these are some things, even if you know a little bit, but it was not the way we know it today. And it will change, and I'm sure by next decade, even this will be forgotten. So in some ways, it is a documentation of the period, and it will be probably useful for youngsters, or maybe when you sit down with your parents and families, and you go through it, how you always going to go back, and parents always have these stories to tell. हमारे time में ऐसा होता था, हमारे time में ऐसा होता था. So it's like a collective memory which you can share it with your friends, your families, and just keep it for prosperity, and also a lot of things you have already seen it here and there, so this has been collectively put at one place. So that was the aim of the book, and I hope I've done justice to it.
Right, it is indeed. It comes across as a lived experience. Your memories really speak through the pages, and I think you have been very successful in conveying that. But coming to this thing, this nostalgia, I think you have used nostalgia and romance as two very important guideposts in your book, right?
Yes.
But what would be your understanding of nostalgia and romance? Because nostalgia can be very deceptive as well, right? Memories can be deceptive, right? It's almost fabricated. Memories are designed, uh, so to speak. Right. So, what would your understanding of nostalgia and romancing be?
Coming to romance, I'll start because they both are interconnecting. So the book is about nostalgia, but then what nostalgia is, what it did was romance. So now, like my understanding, as I said, this is not fiction. This is exactly what everything which is in the book is experienced firsthand. So there was a time when we were discussing the title of the book. So we had many titles, we came. In fact, my working title of the book was Yesterday Once More, Once Upon a Time. So those are very nostalgic kind of a things. But then I wanted it to be personal. And what personal was that, for me, romancing the 80s was that when romance is just not with people or things, it can be with things, your what you are experiencing. So everything what you do and what you are experiencing can be romance. So I remember that when we used to sit down and to watch Doordarshan television. And we would sit, and there was no other channel. There was only one channel we had. So you sit in front of the television and you wait and you pause. And when you're waiting and to wait for the program, that was, you are there in that particular moment. You are present there. So it's like, you're waiting for something to start, your anticipation, you are happy, the joy. It's like bundle of emotions come. So that's romance, you know so everything was rationed, everything was very small. So when you had to say have a aerated drink, we didn't have any options. We could not open a fridge and there could be a choice of aerated drinks in the fridge. It was rationed. It was to be asked, it was given. Maybe weekends it was
Also, the
given.
options were limited.
The options were very limited. So even when you had to have a first sip of your rated drink or a Campa Cola, it was romance. So you were there in the moment. We savored every moment. So
Right.
that was the whole idea, that it was romance. You had to go for a movie, that your father has booked tickets. So the whole day you are anticipating, oh, today we are going for a movie. Oh, 3 o'clock we are going to go for the matinee show. We'll leave that. We'll go there and we'll eat those oily burgers, and we will get a Campa Cola and the packet of popcorns we'll had, which are slightly yellow in color. So that whole anticipation, that whole wait was also a romance. So so that's why I think it was, even the clothes what we were, even the music which we heard, because the choices were very limited. So we were always savored every little thing which we got. So from that angle, yes, it was romance, but nostalgia is, of course, when you look back and the memories which were created. But then all memories were, we were just romancing with everything. It was every day was romance with something or the other. Of course, that time you don't realize it. So when I look back, so that nostalgia is converted into a romance. So now, when I see the things right now here, it's not, you don't bother about it. If I compare it, you switch on the television, you have 100 things, you are half there, half there, you're always flipping through, and by end of it you'll disclose it. So here, before Chitrahar, I remember we would sit down in anticipation of a 30-minute program, and by default we'll watch Krishi Darshan as well, because it was in anticipation. We wanted to watch, we wanted that it should be, we should not miss it. And of course, that's a separate story. The static and the reception of the television would never be clear, and you wanted to sort out everything before the thing. So that's the story of romance.
Right. So I believe this is your first venture into the world of authorhood. Am I right?
Yes, yes, that's
Yes.
true.
So I was reading in one of your interviews, you said that there was quite a bit of anxiety before you started on this journey, right?
Yeah.
So how has life been after stepping into the shoes of an author?
So, it was anxiety from the point of view. So I do graphic designing and design as a profession. So it was a creative extension of my work. The only difference was I was used to briefs, corrections, feedbacks, and when client will reject, you give options and you do that. So there was always a guideline which was provided. But here there was nobody to give me brief. There was nobody to give me any, guide me, or even reject or select or give me any applaud. Nothing. So I was judge and the jury both. So that what really caused little anxiety, that am I on the right track, am I doing something. And to be honest, when I started, there was no grand vision of that it'll has to be published and it has to go there. So everything like fell very organically, everything came out. So yes, I started it. Yes, I wanted to convert it into a book. I wanted to have a collective memory. I wanted to convert and put the memories in one form, and gradually it developed. So anxiety came from, there was no checks. And otherwise, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The process, I was completely immersed. Every minute, if I look back, I think that was the best part of the book. When I was doing it, I relived the memories of 80s. I understood myself more, because when you look back and you take out the memories and you understand yourself more. And in the pictures in this book are interestingly all collected by real people. So more or less, they are not collected from different, libraries or stock pictures. So they're all real. So even people who had collected, because I wanted it like that. So people who gave the pictures also, they also had to tell, they had so much stories to tell. And so many of people, they just gave me the dump of their personal albums. Okay, take whatever you want. Or when they had to choose, even they would go into, back in nostalgia and say, oh yeah, we did that, oh please take this and all. So in fact, later when the book came out, so obviously I had not used all the pictures and all. So I got a lot of like, oh, you have not used our picture. The book is, oh, you have not used our pictures. So, so nervousness was because there was no checks for me. And of course, the checks came later when I went through the publishers and all, and I tied up with Om, and we had the same vision. And the book is out because of my publishers. So we were on the same page, and they saw the merit in that, and they shared my vision. So that's excellent.
Right. So, how does your career as a graphic design professional and your new role as an author, how do they inform each other?
So as I said that this book is extension of it's a my creative expression and extension of my work. So that way I don't think so there is nothing changed. It's just that I'm just probably sitting with you, and if I had not done the book we would have not been sitting together. So that's little few changes, but apart from the work, there is no change. It's exactly what I do. And earlier also, and I've done it. So I used to do a lot of coffee table books for publishers. I had done covers, book covers, and branding, and corporate communication work for my clients and all. So in terms of the work, no, nothing. But um, I I had to like redo my little style of a design also. So like everybody has a little style of a design. So when I did this book, I had to reinvent myself. I had to dig deeper, definitely, because as I said, the title of the book was different. It changed multiple layouts. So before I decided, okay, this is the approach I want to take. So I started with very sepia toned, nostalgic kind of a look also. And in fact I had already done about 30, 40 pages, and then I went back to the drawing board. I said, no, this is not what I want. So that's as I thoroughly enjoyed the process of doing this book. And I had to dig deeper, I did a lot of research on the thing, and it was just like free for all, and enjoyable process.
It almost seems like you have used nostalgia itself as a methodology, and it's almost like a people's history. You have gone to different persons and collected their photographs, their materials. Right? Am I getting this correct? You have
Yes, yes.
Yes, you've collected those things from going straight to the sources, not mediated through archives or libraries. Right?
No, not at all. In fact, when I started the book, I said I want to do it. So my first research document, it's about 400 pages document I had, and I started documenting from the point of view the research papers, which was randomly from all sources. I used to just take printouts and carbon copies and everything, and I used to bind them. So it was actually world edits. Then I narrow it down. I said no, because that's not something I want to do. It was I wanted to be a personal experience, what I have experienced firsthand. So it changed, it narrowed it down to India. Then I said, now I have been in north of India and being in Delhi. So some things, if you see in the book, will be little more Delhi centric than the other part of India. But I said, no, let me be true to myself and the book, because yes, I have been here in north of India, so it has to be like that. So then I narrowed it down. I said, no, I'm not trying to document um, 80s. So gradually it became little more, the approach become more narrower, and that helped me, and that gave me a lot of clarity. And that's why I could remain true to the book. So if I had tried to capture everything and put everything what I had read and not experienced, I think it would have not come through, and I would have not enjoyed the process then.
So I think it's deeply personal as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's personal, but at the same time, it is collective. So everybody who will go through it, they would have experienced it something or the other, or they'll have add. But yes, the base is there for everybody. And as I said, I already have requests which I'm already putting it down. And by God's grace, if we do get into a second edition, we will add those. I've already keep getting all the time, oh, you have, oh, we did these to do that, please add this. I have a lot of pictures I can provide you. So I'm already getting that kind of a feedback.
Going a little bit into the details of the book, your book deals a lot with consumer culture, tied with the visual culture, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I've come across lots of mentions of advertisers, jingles, those things, and posters. How do you think those elements of visual culture and consumer culture are different from today's visual and consumer culture? Is there anything different that you see?
Yeah, in terms of a visual culture, a everything was done by hand. Computerization came in late 80s. So before that, everything was done by hand. Whether it was your drawings, your film posters, your advertising, most of the things were drawn so by hand. And so even the film poster, the style of a film posters, if you see there was a certain style, everything was very bold and very brash and vivid, loud colors. So and from that angle, if you see it stained, so everything had a typical one style of a font. So if you see the film posters, they were all with thick strokes. The font used to be very bold with heavy shadows. That was a style. And with your polka dots, your neon colors, they were all very much acceptable. So the louder the better it was, and the bigger the better. And from that, now things are narrower, more simpler. Got more so the style has changed, the people's tastes have changed. That evolved, and then of course more finesse came when the computers came. More finishing started coming. So that style is completely, even the hoardings were all hand painted. The artists used to be there that time. They used to paint the all hoardings of the movies. The billboards were all hand done. And if you remember, even when we had houses, there was no concept of a nameplate, was all handwritten. We used to call people and they would write the name of the house numbers and everything. They would come with the paint and the flat brush. So more or less, and even when I remember, like when I started my career, so we were doing a lot of magazines. So I was doing in drama and Swagat magazine for Indian Airlines. So that time, gallery had started coming. Galleries we used to make actually on a ivory sheet. We used to make a grid of the magazine. So if it's a 60-page magazine, we used to make a grid on a piece of paper, blank sheets, and we used to paste all the galleys, and that's how the magazine was made. And if there was a correction which came, say A and E, one correction, so we had to actually physically cut out a letter E and replace it. That's how the corrections were done. So and now I don't have to emphasize or tell how things are done here. But so this visual things have really changed, and jingles. So it was very popular that time, to have all the advertising or ads would have jingles. So which is unlike, so all the jingles of that time, your Nirma, your La La La,
Yes,
your
and those are iconic
yeah,
even now.
iconics. Yeah, those were iconic jingles, and it had a lot of recall value, and that was a trend. And they were all very basic, hummable songs. You have, and they were like poems. So the long form was very acceptable. Unlike today's, it's a short form of writing. We used to have very good long copy. We used to have a headline, a sub headline, and then a long copy. So that long form of writing is not there anymore. So things have changed. And so it used to be a very interesting to, if you, I'm sure you will also remember, you would always read the full ad. Now it's just a headline, one catchy hook line would be there, and that's it. And then you scan it and you go there, or there'll be some link put there. So but that time there was everything you had to say there and then, in your 50 words, your one headline, and that's it. And that's how advertising was done.
Right, so there was more of a personal touch that went into the making of these products, which we now don't quite get.
Yeah, because there was no follow up or a backup. It's not that, okay, we are just giving you a little teaser in the ad, and rest you scan it, or there's a link, you go and find out the details. It was not like that. So whatever you did it was either you will get consumers' attention in that particular ad, or you will miss it. So it was tougher that time. and it was
Right.
simpler. There were the layouts were very simple. It was very structured and very grid based, so nobody was fighting and for space. So now it's because of a digital medium, things are much brighter, and you have to, colors play a very important role in a when you go digital, but newspapers also went colored much later. So the newspapers was black and white, so we were all used to having a black and white ad, and it used to be later for color came much later.
Hmm. And advertising, I suppose, had to work its way through those limitations, like black and white advertising,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And they found, I suppose, creative ways to do that even.
Oh yes, I said because they were content driven. That's why they were content driven advertising that time. So now it's pretty much visual driven. And
Right.
or maybe balance, maybe not fair to say is visual, but yes, that time it was completely content driven advertising.
Right. I think you spoke about Campa Cola a bit. Campa,
Yeah.
right? In
Yes.
one of your previous responses.
Yes.
I think you know that they have brought Campa back. I
Yes.
think Ambani Group
Ambani, yes,
has
that's it.
acquired the brand name Campa, and they're bringing it back.
That's
So,
right.
uh, where do you see the 80s still living on, or do you at all see it still living on?
I don't think so. It's living on. I think these are all ways to cling on to nostalgia because it's changing. Even if Campa comes back, it'll be in a new avatar, and it's like in cashing on that time. But it won't be same. And the thing is, because you will still have Campa will be just one of the options now you will add, but it's not that there will be only Campa. So that whole feeling and the will can never come. So it's like, now Campa will be in addition to, you have already have 10 things, but that time it was just only Campa. So I think it's just basic in cashing on the brand, and creating of the 80s era, but not the feeling cannot be same. Or the emotion cannot be same with the association of what you had with the Campa at that time. This is personally, maybe for some people, but I personally think the association won't be because of its Campa, and oh, it used to be like this in our old time, because we are so I know exactly how the bottle was. And I remember from schools we were all taken to a Campa factory, to visit it. They used to get miniatures, from there. And and nobody told us how many sugars and how many spoons of sugar went into Campa. We were not bothered. We gulped it down. So I really don't know how it's going to be.
Right. So, from your book, the 80s also comes across as a time of transience, a time of uncertainties. I think you speak about the TVs, right? How a slight tilt of the antenna, it would mess up the pictures. And even the floppy disks, you insert the floppy disk, and then you start praying that it works, right?
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
you to speak a bit more about uncertainties.
yeah. Because when you'll go and start the car in the morning, and car was a rare. I'm, I'll come back to the computers and thing, but you car was very also not very common to have it. But whoever had it, you start the ignition. You don't know whether your car will start. Your engine will probably not work. And it was very common sight to have, you call people and they'll push the car, and then the car will start, and then you'll wave to them and say thank you, and then you'll go off. So it was one of those, you put in the floppy. And I remember I used to put a floppy, used to copy the work. And if you kept it out and you're carrying it somewhere, if you keep it in the car, and if the sun was strong, the floppy would go bad and it would not read. And you were always praying for your very important critical work that I hope it works and I hope it reads, because you had to take printouts or you had presentation or whatever. So because technology was very new, so it was in a very nascent stage, so it was still taking time. Now we didn't have now we, there was buffering time was very very high that time. And so I think because of the technology being very nascent, everything was new, and we had to live with it, and we very gracefully accepted it. All this, we were never impatient about it. If we switch on the television, if it not worked, okay, it is a static and there's a grainy screen. You will send somebody on top to adjust the antenna, but it was part. We accepted it very gracefully and we were okay with that. It was like a fun activity. Somebody would go up and you will adjust it and you will come back and you'll watch it, and again in between probably there'll be a interruption, which very famously it used to be rukavat ke liye khed hai. And but there, of course, nobody was apologetic about it. It was very much part of it. And we would just move on. But now imagine in today's time, like we are chatting and suddenly, like I was on mute and unmute, and these are like small little few seconds, and we are restless or don't know what to do, and we are chatting, do this and do that. But it was very much acceptable. But I think that was to do with everything was new and we were learning technology ourselves. So that changes, of course things changed and it became streamlined later.
Right.
So
So, yes. So, how do you think the aesthetic standards have changed, especially in reference to movies from the 80s to uh, today? What difference do you see?
80s was, movies was, blockbuster movies. They were all multi-starrer movies, which is a big change. It was time for multi-starrers, and at the same time, it was a movie where it was loud, music was loud, music was the stars were worshipped. And as we say that that time, of course, Amitabh Bachchan was from 70s more, and 80s, of course, he's still there. But all the movies were very male oriented, and male driven stories were there. The heroines of that time, Sri Devi came, Madhuri Dixit, and all. So everything, it was like absolutely loud dance drama from Himmat Wala, with Jaya Prada, with all the, matkas and, jhatkas, everything worked that time, with white shoes, with Bhapida, with Mithunda, with disco dancer. So it was more is less was the theme of all the movies that time. and and I think the main prime change of the which has happened is that multi-starrer movies have just recently started coming, but it had completely stopped. It was in 90s, it was one single hero kind of a movies trend started. So 80s was, we had from Vidhata to Kranti. So they were all multi-starrer movies. Ram Balram. So which was your favorite movie of 80s, or and if I may ask? Are we there?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, very much. Very much.
Yes. Okay. Uh, so, as we were saying, um, uh, so we were on the topic of movies and how the aesthetic standards have
Yeah.
changed there, right?
Yeah. I asked you, I
Yes.
said, do you have any memory of any your favorite movie of 80s?
Uh, as of now, nothing comes to mind, but songs I certainly remember from the 80s.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh, so, uh, as on to the next question. So, uh, what are the lessons that, let's say, our time period can derive from the 80s? So, let's say it's me. What lessons would you like to take from the 80s time period?
Um, so I don't think so. It's fair to say for everybody, but I would not lessons. I would put it differently. So it's not a lesson, or it's something I can say that what I savored and which I would like to have it. So not necessarily I would call it a lesson that it is there. So in a design, there is a very fundamental principle we have, which is of white space. So, and when white space allows you to focus on a central message or a central thing. So this is what I think, and I miss it, and which is not there. So it has to be as a, and it's also, it comes from the same what we have been saying repeatedly, that there were too many options. So here, that time we had very single focused, we had very limited option. So we were very focused in whatever and we did, and we were always there in present, and that white space around it allowed us to keep the pace and allowed us to savor those moments. So it's not exactly a lesson, but that's something I think is probably missing, and that's something we can learn and try to bring it back. Little pause and have a white space around us, in physical and in digital world, whichever world. And
Right.
as you know that Oxford's word of the year has been brain rot this year's, which is so in some ways it's exactly like that. So we have no white space around in the brains left.
Right.
So it's not a
There's so
lesson, but
much.
it's a tip,
Yes.
like I think we should remember that we
Right.
all need
There's
it, and we must.
so little time to reflect. We are
Yes,
at all times bombarded with so many things,
that's
so
right.
much amount
That's
of
right.
information.
That's right. That's right.
Right. Uh, 80s, as I understand it, was also a time of political upheavals, right? There was the incident of assassination of Indira Gandhi.
Yes.
Yes, so those unsavory incidents were there as well. So, do you think nostalgia can work its magic on those incidents as well? Make politics in our country is, for the most part, a really unsavory thing, right? Do you think nostalgia can work its magic on politics as well? Can you put on the glass of nostalgia and look at politics and perceive it as something pleasant? Is
No,
that a possibility?
no. If you see the book, there is only if most of the topics are given spreads. Spreads means 2 pages at
Yes.
least. So that's the
Hmm.
only page politically. It's only a single page, and that also everything is compiled so it was very consciously I left out the political part, because apart from, of course, political things which were happening, which were good things happening and all also, but the Indira Gandhi's assassination, that particular year was quite an awful year. We had Union Carbide that year. The
Yes.
seeds of terrorism had started. Operation Blue Star happened. Then Indira Gandhi's assassination. So it all happened in that particular year. So so that was a year. I don't know what lessons we have learned, and I personally didn't want to go, because this was more of a happy memory of the things and personal memories of the thing. But I purposely left out on the political part of it, you know. So I would, it was conscious decision actually. So there was, in fact, I have personally, I have newspapers of Indira Gandhi's assassination. I have newspapers of Union Carbide, of those, you know, clippings of those. But it was all consciously we left it out, you know, didn't want to cover those incidences.
Right. Hmm. Your book certainly works as a very good conversation starter. I think you mentioned this. Your book really works as a good conversation starter because I have been having conversations with my friends about what it might have been like living in the 80s. I think it works that way perfectly well. Uh, you also talk a lot about the role of media and how it sort of made our country into a community. We can talk about Ramayana and Mahabharat, how it became a craze almost. People would
Yes,
put garlands on their television sets,
yes,
right?
yes,
I
yes,
have only
yes.
heard stories about those. And
Yeah,
Ramayana and Mahabharata, they were brought back during the pandemic times because
yes,
maybe then, in those trying times, we needed to feel like a community again, once more.
yes.
How important or what role did mass media, radio, television, those things played in the 80s in the community making process? In literature, we talk about the nation as an imagined community. Nation is not defined by its border because borders are always changing. Those things are unstable, but those collective experiences, collective memories, those sort of they make us into a community. So, what role did they really play?
So, Agniva, you see, can you imagine that you are, say, a family of four people? So, can you imagine all four people watching the same program in today's time? So it's something rare, you know. So if there are
Right.
four people or even two people, you are not watching the same thing. You are all, and not even on the same platform.
Hmm.
You know, either you're watching, you'll have phone, you'll have your tablet, you'll have your television, and different. You don't know. So it's very hard to even imagine when one nation and one channel, and you're watching the same thing. So you can imagine how it brought the whole nation together. So of course, when in India we had satellite TV, and then Doordarshan went national, and Ramayan and other programs also. Of course, I will take example of Ramayan to start with, but then there were other programs. So imagine on a Sunday morning when Ramayan came, the entire nation would be watching one single program. So, what more unifying factor do you need in the country? You know, and the everything would come to a standstill. In fact, BBC did a story on that, and they said the highways used to be absolutely empty. The truck drivers would stop on the sides. They would stop wherever possible they could, you know, watch television and watch Ramayan. People would, the trains would run late. People would shift their weddings and, you know, religious ceremonies, and they'll plan their timings so that they could watch Ramayan. And
The
the
only comparable thing I can think of is the India-Pakistan match.
Yeah, of course. Cricket has always been like that, and it was. But that time it was TV programs like that unified, even in the families. You know, if you're watching a Sunday movie on a thing, the watching television was it was a very community thing in your house in the colony. If you not everybody would have televisions, so somebody would have it, and everybody was welcome to go to that house. You would go to that house, you will sit there, you were welcomed. They would open the doors, they would open their house for you, and you would be watching with friends, families, neighbors. So there was so much of unifying factors in that, you know. It united families. So I think that media played a very important role. And even I remember even election news when used to come, we were so starved for movies. So when election news used to come, and they would be 24/7, and in between they would, as a buffer time, they would give movies. So entire day we would be watching that, you know. and that united everybody. So there was no choices. Whoever, we all watched the same program, we all listened to the same things, and you could just you'll have the same experience. So that's another very interesting part of the 80s. If you talk to somebody of 90s, you will have different experiences. But 80s, because it was so niche, I would say that anybody from 80s would have experienced that. It would not be different from mine, it would not be different from somebody else. So that's so 80s is a very unifying decade as such. Whereas later on, it just kept expanding, your choices were more, and so you experience something else, you experience something else. Even today you'll say, oh, I watched that, I said, oh, I don't even know about it, oh, tell me, where is it? So you'll take inputs, but your experience, what you are experiencing is your own. So if today, suppose you have to record today's decade, or nine, but it will be very difficult, it will be just yours. So here interesting is my experience, and my living 80s as a decade is more or less exactly the same as somebody else who was in 80s, because we didn't have anything else.
Right. The taste of my own and my parents, they are so radically different. I cannot imagine myself sitting in front of the TV along with them watching the same TV program. I'd rather
Yes.
be on my laptop, let's say.
Yeah, with your children, with your spouse, with your friends,
Yes,
you couldn't be watching the same program, because
yes,
either you would have watched it, either you want to, maybe you start together, but you say, oh, I don't like it, you will have, so it's not, it's almost impossible to be watching a program at the same pace, same program at the same time.
right. So we have talked quite a bit about the 80s. We have gone into things that you have mentioned in your books. We have also gone into things you have not mentioned in your books, but maybe that could be a later project. So my final question would be related to that. What's next for you?
What next? So I was
Yes.
asked this. I said that this is really interesting what you have done, and how about now doing the series on 90s? So as I said that it's so first-hand experienced and collective. So I really don't know. I'm not ready, and I really don't know whether I will be able to do 90s or other decades, and or rather I was that focused, rather, actually. So I would say I was, you're living through all the other decades and time, but I don't know. I think I was far more focused on that decade than any other decade. So I don't know from that, but yes, I would definitely. I enjoyed the creative freedom which I got doing this book, and not dictated by. I was something which I was nervous about. I enjoyed that process. So maybe not 90s or something else, but definitely my focus will be on a visual and a um, creative expression, visual expression. So because that's my
Right.
forte and that's what I enjoy.
Right. If you end up really writing a book about 90s, yes, it may not be a collective book about collective experience, but it can very certainly be a very interesting uh, memoir.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
But I'm still romancing the 80s, so I have to get over that romance and then move on to the 80s.
Right. Now, questions from our live audience.